Driving down Wesley Drive, Mike Morrison looked at each of the 11 houses from the corner to his own. Mike had framed 8 of the homes. The remaining 3 had been built by John Peary, a local contractor. There was a rivalry between Peary Construction and Curtis Construction Incorporated, where Mike worked, but it wasn't unfriendly. Once, when John had run out of concrete 3/4 through a pour, Curtis sent his crew over to help. Of course, we know the southeast corner is the only corner that'll still be standing after the first good snowstorm, Curtis had joked as they left. Ah, screw you, Curtis, John had laughed. Their companies also met for the annual 4th of July picnic at Jordan Air Park, competing in barbecues, softball, and horseshoe shows before gathering to watch the evening fireworks. Mike was puzzled but not concerned when he saw John Peary's Mercedes-Benz SUV in front of his house, the license plate reading PAAROI1. After steering into his garage, he glanced at the SUV again and lowered the garage door. "Hey, Rhonda, what's John Peary doing here?" Mike called out as he entered. "Living room," Rhonda replied loudly. Mike stepped into the living room, intending to greet their guest, but froze at the sight before him. Rhonda and John were seated together on the small couch. Rhonda looked uncomfortable while John wore a smug expression. His children, Michelle and Mickey, sat on the long couch, visibly excited. "So, what's going on here?" Mike asked. Rhonda fidgeted. Mike, there's no easy way to say this," she mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "Just spit it out," Mike said, his voice hardening. "He's got a swimming pool," 12-year-old Michelle interjected. "And a boat," Mickey added. "He said he'd take me out on Merrily Lake and everything." "Me too," Michelle chimed in, glaring at her brother. Mike's expression darkened. "You don't say another word," he warned John, his voice like stone. "Mike, don't make this harder than it has to be," Rhonda snapped. "Oh, I'm sorry," Mike retorted sarcastically. "I didn't realize I was the problem here." "There's no need for this," John started. "I said not another word. Snake," Mike growled, his anger rising. John moved to stand, but Mike shoved him back into his seat. "Mike, don't you dare," Rhonda screamed. "I thought you'd be a man about this," John snarled. "What is it about not another word that's so hard for you to understand?" Mike asked, his hand lashing out, striking John across the face. John's stunned expression almost made Mike smile, almost. But his family was falling apart before his eyes. His daughter, his sweet angel, was ready to trade him for a swimming pool. His son, his tiger, was willing to toss him aside for a few fishing trips. The last time Mike had taken Michelle to the Y, she spent the whole time ogling boys, posing, and preening. She hadn't even dipped a toe in the pool. And Mickey? Mike had taken him to Merrily Lake several times. They'd fished, father and son, though each time Mike had to drag Mickey with him. They didn't go out on a boat, sure, but they'd cast their lines from the shore. Whenever Mickey managed to catch a fish, Mike was the one to unhook it. Mike was the one who cleaned and prepared it for dinner too. After Rhonda, Michelle, Mickey, and a scowling John left, Mike sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cold Coors as he read through the divorce petition. Rhonda was asking for primary physical custody, with Mike receiving ample visitation. She also requested $400 per child per month, plus half of all medical and educational expenses, and other incidentals to be discussed later. The microwave dinner he ate was flavorless, sitting heavily in his stomach. Mike had been hungry when he'd walked in, but now he just needed something to absorb the 3 or 4 or 5 beers he was planning on drinking. In the end, he had 2.5 beers. There was no point in getting drunk. He had work the next day. Wife or no wife, kids or no kids, he had a job to do. And Rhonda Gladys Livingston Morrison wasn't worth the hangover. Rhonda had been a somewhat awkward 18-year-old when Mike first met her at an auto parts store. The girl was muttering angrily to herself as she tried to figure out which battery to get for her Nissan. "The charts are right here," Mike said quietly. "Aha, but my car's not on there," Rhonda snapped, pointing at the store employee. "And Tweedledum over there is too busy to get off his fat bum and help." "So, what kind of car you got?" Mike asked. He located the battery she needed and even offered to install it for her. Tweedledum shot a glare at her as he rang up the purchase. "So, where's the car?" Mike asked as he carried the heavy battery. 17th and Jackson, Rhonda said bitterly. "Had to walk here." Mike drove his Ford F-250 to the apartment complex and installed the new battery. Charles Bud Livingston, Rhonda's father, came out and struck up a conversation with Mike. Bud found out that Mike, a 24-year-old man, was gainfully employed with Curtis Construction, had a knack for fixing cars, and enjoyed an ice-cold Coors beer. "Well, son, if you're gonna date my daughter, better save up every penny," Bud chuckled. "That girl's never seen a shiny thing she didn't just have to have." "Dad," Rhonda huffed, glancing at Mike, who looked every bit the part of a hard-working man, sandy blonde hair, a strong square face, light blue eyes, and a bronzed build from working long hours outdoors. If Rhonda hadn't been so irritated when they first met, she might have flirted with him. She was just working up the courage to do so when her father reappeared, putting a stop to her plans. Mike gave her a cool little smile, but his expression remained unreadable. "Good to know," Mike said to Bud, as he closed the hood on Rhonda's car. A few days later, Frank Mears, Tweedledum, called Mike. "Hey, Mike. You know that girl you helped with the battery the other day? She came in here asking for your phone number." Yeah, sure. Go ahead," Mike agreed. Mike soon learned Bud hadn't been exaggerating. Rhonda had a habit of wanting more of anything she liked. When Mike picked her up for their second date, Bud showed him her bulging closet filled with shoes, boots, sandals, and 6 pairs of flip-flops. 6 pairs of flip-flops, Bud teased. 1 for each toe, huh? On their second date, Mike also discovered that Rhonda was quite affectionate. As their relationship progressed, so did her pregnancy. Rhonda, mildly attractive when they first met, began to blossom as her pregnancy advanced. By the time she gave birth to Michelle Christina Morrison, she had filled out more physically and had started drawing attention when they visited the mall. At first, Rhonda resented the attention her newborn daughter received, especially from Mike and his family. To compensate, she convinced Mike that she needed braces, thinking it would get her more attention. When the braces were removed, revealing a beautiful smile, they discovered she was pregnant again. "Really? I just got my figure back, and now I'm pregnant again," Rhonda exclaimed. "Mike, you're getting a vasectomy." "No one's cutting on Big Mike's Big Mike," Mike replied, gently rocking their sleepy daughter. Becoming a mother did help Rhonda shift her priorities, and she eventually accepted that some of her desires would have to take a back seat to the needs of their children. Now, sitting at the kitchen table, Mike poured the remainder of his 3rd beer down the sink, rinsed the can, and tossed it into the recycling bin. Tomorrow, he'd ask Lyle for a good attorney recommendation. Overall, he agreed with most of Rhonda's demands in the divorce petition: primary custody of the children, child support, and half the medical and educational expenses. But you wonder how she planned to cover the other half. Perhaps she had manipulated John Peary into paying it. Rhonda was also demanding half of his retirement accounts and the home's value, even though Mike had owned the house outright before they met, and she hadn't contributed a cent to his retirement. When Mike approached Curtis about a lawyer, Curtis's face grew redder and redder as Mike spoke. "That no-good snake," Lyle thundered. "Exactly what I called him," Mike said with a tight smile. "I thought, dang it, now I wish I'd said something." Lyle snapped, digging through his wallet. "Said something about what?" Mike prompted as Lyle pulled out one of the business cards. "Picnic scene. Saw John hanging around Rhonda. Seemed too friendly," Lyle admitted, handing Mike a card. "That's Trennan's daughter. She's the one who kept Mary Lynn from getting half the company when she left me last. Good God, it's already been 3 years. Heck, time flies. Anyway, I thought John was hanging around Rhonda a bit too much, but then again, she was wearing that outfit, you know. Mike did remember. Rhonda had worn a man's button-up shirt, tied at the waist beneath her 34C chest, revealing her toned midriff and a gold heart navel ring. Her cut-off shorts showed off her sleek tanned legs. It was the kind of outfit that drew attention, and John seemed to have noticed. Barbara Trenton, Rhonda's attorney, didn't mince words when it came to their mediation process. "Well, Mr. Morrison, I'm amazed you managed to save anything at all, considering how much your wife likes to spend," Barbara confided, glancing over the financial documents. "She didn't contribute a penny," Mike muttered. "Aha," Barbara smiled lightly. Her instincts were correct, and the case did go to mediation. Rhonda fiercely contested the revised petition, seeing the money in the house as hers. During this time, she made it difficult for Mike to see his children. Every time he complained, Rhonda would smugly remind him he should have signed the original petition. Curtis did his part too, telling anyone who would listen about John Peary's affair and the fallout. Part 2. Telling anyone who would listen about John Peary's affair and the fallout. Building supply retailers suddenly refused to extend credit to Peary Construction, forcing John to pay cash for everything, which strained his resources. When the bank hesitated on funding some speculative houses in a new subdivision, John's frustrations boiled over. The weekends Mike had his children. They were sullen and uncommunicative. Michelle and Mickey told him about the fun things they did with their mom and John, making it clear they preferred being with them. "We could be water skiing with Mom and Mr. John." Michelle sneered when Mike suggested going to the Y. "Yeah, Dad," Mickey added. "I even got a boogie board." John Peary's trouble deepened when he bid for a major office building contract in Rockell Falls. The board looked at him with skepticism. "You're living with a woman you're not married to?" Harley Rittmuller asked. "Ah, what's that got to do with anything?" John stammered, caught off guard. "Not just any woman, someone else's wife," another board member chimed in. Despite John's protests about his company's solid reputation, the board rejected his $4 million bid, citing concerns over his trustworthiness. John's fury only grew when he saw Curtis, Rittmuller, and Mike Morrison on the evening news, laughing together at a groundbreaking ceremony for the same project he'd lost out on. As the men awkwardly shared a ceremonial shovel, John seethed, watching the opportunity slip away. His troubles mounted when Raymond Jetty, one of his longtime painters, nervously entered his office to inform him that his paycheck had bounced. Ray had been with John since the start, but now even loyal employees were feeling the strain. "I mean, hey, things happen, you know," Ray said, fidgeting. "But I need to get paid." John's troubles snowballed further when a homeowner canceled a basement remodel because all of John's workers had jumped ship to Curtis Construction. Even John's attorney, Brian White, began insisting on being paid up front, and Rhonda discovered Mike had canceled her credit cards. Frustrated, Bud grumbled to his daughter, "Honestly, you ought to go tell Mike you're sorry. Beg him to forgive you. Remember, you married him. Promise to forsake all others." "Yeah, I remember that. And I paid for that wedding," Rhonda said bitterly. The mediation continued, with the court-appointed mediator, Michael Schiff, reviewing the petitions. He examined bank statements and receipts, listening carefully to both sides. When Barbara Trenton played the tape of Mike complaining about not having enough access to his children, Rhonda smugly replied that if he had just signed the original petition, he'd have more time with them. "So, Mrs. Morrison, the children are pawns. You want money, so you use the children," Michael snapped. "It's not like that," Brian White, Rhonda's attorney, interjected. "But Mrs. Morrison does have expenses." "Mr. Morrison also has expenses," Michael said, indicating Mike's bank statements. "And he's been faithfully sending in child support every month. As for Mrs. Morrison's expenses, might I suggest she get a job?" Mike's 39th birthday came a month after the hollow victory in mediation. He called Rhonda on her new cell phone, the one John Peary was paying for, and asked if the kids could join him for a simple birthday dinner at Benny's Burger Bar. "Nothing fancy, just Benny's, you know," Mike said, forcing himself to sound cheerful. It still hurt to talk to her. The pain of her betrayal was still fresh. Rhonda had looked stunning at the mediation, all dressed up with her hair done, and the sight of her was still raw in his mind. "Your dad wants to take you to Benny's. It's his birthday," Rhonda said, her tone sharp. Mike's heart broke when he heard his daughter whine, "God, do I have to?" Rhonda, clearly trying to think of an excuse, said, Mike," but the call had already ended. She sighed and called back, leaving a message. "Hey, I think the call got dropped. You're probably still talking. Anyway, Michelle already has plans, and Mickey does too. Maybe you can do something this weekend." By Friday afternoon, Rhonda was waiting for the call that Mike was on his way to pick up the kids. Michelle was complaining about having to go. She had struck up a new friendship with Caitlin Grady, the 13-year-old girl next door, and she'd rather be with her than with her dorky dad. Mickey, as usual, was moody and uncommunicative. When Rhonda asked what was bothering him, he simply grumbled. Nothing. 5:30 came and went. 6 o'clock ticked by, and still there was no call from Mike. By 6:30, Rhonda dialed his number again, only to hear the message that his phone was no longer in service. Confused, she tried once more and got the same result. "You about ready?" John asked as he came down the stairs, dressed in a dark suit. "Doesn't look like it," Rhonda replied. "Mike hasn't picked the kids up yet." "Then call him," John snapped, his handsome face twisted in frustration. "Gee, great idea, John. Why didn't I think of that?" Rhonda shot back sarcastically. "Oh wait, I did. His number's not in service." "Good," John gloated. "That jerk's having a hard time." "Come on, kids," Rhonda sighed, slipping on her heels. "Get your stuff. We'll drop you off at your dad's." "I was gonna take the vet," John grumbled. "John, the clients will be inside. They won't see the car. Come on, we're going to be late." John continued to mutter complaints, but he grabbed the keys to the Mercedes. Michelle grumbled as she got into the car, and Mickey followed, scowling. "Oh my God," Rhonda gasped as they pulled up to Mike's house. A gold standard real estate sign was staked in the front yard. Come on, John ordered. "They're already there." "John, the kids can't stay here." Rhonda shrieked when she noticed the house's windows were bare. "There aren't even curtains." "If we screw this meeting up because of your kids, I swear," John hissed. John peeled out of the driveway, leaving a streak of rubber on the pavement, and sped out of the neighborhood. He had to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting a slow-moving car in front of them. "John, no meeting is worth getting us all killed for," Rhonda screamed. On the 3rd of the month, Rhonda received an $800 check, as she did every 3rd of the month, unless it was a Sunday or holiday, in which case the check arrived a day earlier. The words of her daughter, "God, do I have to?" echoed in Mike's mind. He had also heard Mickey's sullen tone. After ending the call, Mike sat at the table. For the first time since his mother's death, he cried. He buried his face in his arms and sobbed for what felt like hours. When he finally roused himself, sluggish and disoriented, he looked around the house. Rhonda had already taken anything of value. What remained had only sentimental worth, and the pain of his children's reactions had tarnished even that. Mike loaded what he could into his truck and drove it to the consignment shop. They were happy to take most of the furniture off his hands. They appreciated that Mike had brought it himself in his F-250, though they politely declined the battered old recliner due to health concerns, and the mattress concerns, and the mattresses for the same reason. The dolls, superhero action figures, roller skates, and ice skates, however, were sure to go quickly. As Mike unloaded the boxes, a customer was already sifting through them. Lyle Curtis slipped in a few choice words when Mike told him he was leaving Raquel Falls, leaving Colorado. They shared a manly hug, and a few of the crew shook Mike's hand or hugged him as well. "Where are you headed?" a few asked, eyeing the travel trailer hitched to his truck. "Probably south," Mike shrugged. "It's still summer now, but man, I'm tired of freezing in the winter," Mike said. "Yeah, but it's not like you're using them anyway," one of the men joked, causing Mike to smile and shake his head. Barbara Trenton named a reasonable retainer and agreed to act as Mike's power of attorney for the sale of his home. The Gold Standard real estate agent had already been to the property and assured Mike that she could get $130,000, possibly even $140,000 for the house, despite the recent housing market collapse. Since Mike had paid for the home outright, the entire sales price, minus the agent's commission, would go directly into his account. After Lyle Curtis had his crew repaint the home and install new carpet, the agent's confidence grew. "We'll list it for $160,000. She enthused when Mike answered her call. "Okay," Mike agreed, having no idea that Lyle had taken care of the upgrades. Mike Morrison picked up his divorce decree in Oakleaf, Texas. To celebrate, he went to Tiana Jack's, ordered a half-pound burger with spicy fries, and washed it down with 2 ice-cold draft beers. He even indulged in a $50 dance from an innocent-looking redhead with an infectious smile. Mike had no trouble finding work afterward. Skinduro Construction called Lyle Curtis, who confirmed that Mike was not only as good as he claimed to be, but better. The pay was solid, the work steady, and the crew knew what they were doing. Mike worked from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m., sometimes 4 p.m. when a deadline approached. But the moment the day ended and his coworkers headed home, Mike was reminded he didn't have a home anymore. He lived in his travel trailer at an RV park. To fill the void, Mike often stayed behind to clean up the site. He gathered nails, scrapboards, swept up sawdust and metal filings. Anything to keep busy. "Long day, Mike?" Joe Tinetti asked one afternoon as Mike swept a concrete foundation. "Yeah," Mike said, continuing to sweep. "My wife's making her famous meatloaf in red gravy tonight. Why don't you come over?" Joe suggested. "Thanks, but I think I'll pass," Mike said. "Hurts my feelings you're gonna say no to Catherine Marie's meatloaf," Joe teased. Mike hesitated. "I'll head home, take a shower, then do it," Joe insisted. 12 to 17, Ferguson Drive. "Okay." Mike eventually agreed. The Tinettis lived in a large home among other large homes, and the neighborhood reminded Mike of Raquel Falls, Colorado. Homesickness tugged at him as he parked at the curb. Catherine Marie Tinetti was French-Canadian, while Joe was dark and lanky. Catherine Marie was plump and pale, but they seemed to always be in contact, holding hands, touching each other as they moved around. Joe sat at the head of the table, Catherine Marie at his right, their 20-year-old daughter Antoinette, Tony, to his left, with Joey, their 15-year-old son, and Cheryl, their 17-year-old daughter, rounding out the table. Tony resembled her mother, while Joey and Cheryl took after Joe, though both carried a few extra pounds. Dinner was a lively affair, except for the quiet moment when Joe said grace. Mike learned that Joey played football for Saints Peter and Paul High School, and Cheryl, a senior at Sacred Ascension, was planning to major in biosynthetic engineering at the University of Louisiana at Descartes. "Must get it from her mama," Joe said proudly. "Definitely doesn't come from me." "Tony, you've been quiet," Catherine Marie noted. "I'm starting my last year of college," Tony mumbled, not looking up from her broccoli and cheese. Came home from her first day of kindergarten and said she was going to be a teacher. "Never wanted to be anything else," Joe bragged. Mike thought of his daughter, Michelle. She'd once wanted to be an Olympic skier until she realized it didn't pay much and required daily training. Then she wanted to be a doctor until she decided it was too difficult. The last thing she'd mentioned was wanting to be a meteorologist. "You don't even need to know what you're doing," Michelle had said. "The weather girl just reads everything off a screen." "We need good teachers," Mike agreed, snapping back to the present. Tony finally looked up, smiling. "I decided when Miss Davis taught me. She was so smart, and she talked about the world beyond Texas. Joe interrupted, teasing her. Hate to break it to you, but Miss Davis lied. There is no world outside Texas. When I asked her how to become a teacher, she told me I had to really want it and do well in school, Tony said, playfully swatting her father's arm. Valedictorian at Sacred Ascension, Catherine Mary bragged. On the dean's list every semester. Do you have any kids, Mr. Mike? Tony asked, fixing him with her green eyes. I had two, Mike said, losing his smile. Had? Joey asked, giggling. Lost them somewhere. Tony teased, giving her brother a light smack on the back of his head. Hey! Joey cried out. Well, kind of did, Mike answered. Divorce. Sorry, Joey mumbled, chasing after the dishes as they were being cleared away. After dinner, Mike yawned, then laughed and apologized. He thanked Catherine Marie for having him at her table, wished Tony, Joey, and Cheryl a good night, and surprised Joe by pulling him into a strong hug. Been a while, Joe, he said. Been a while since I sat at a kitchen table like that. The next day, Joe gave no indication that Mike had been a guest at his home. He barked orders, pointed fingers, and yelled, but at 3 o'clock, he called it a day. Mike stayed behind to clean up, disappointed when Joe didn't return to invite him back for another meal. On Friday, Joe was at it again, barking orders, pointing, and yelling. By 2:30, he was handing out paychecks. Tomorrow night, Catherine Marie's making the stuff she calls Jamelia, Joe said once everyone had left. What time should I be there? Mike asked. 6, Joe replied. But hey, tonight Joey's playing. Why don't you come? Mike sat on the hard bleachers, clapping and whistling for Saints Peter and Paul. St. Andrew trounced the home team, but the game was lively. Tony sat beside Mike, wearing cut-off denim shorts and a Saints Peter and Paul jersey. She touched his hand, his arm, and even his leg a few times. Her leg brushed against his often, a subtle closeness that lingered. By 5 o'clock on Saturday, Mike went to Burns & Burns supermarket, picking out a nice strawberry shortcake. After driving around to pass the time, he parked in front of Joe's house. Hey, Mr. Mike, Cheryl greeted with a smile. Dad, Mr. Mike's here. Gonna make him stand outside. Joe called out. Well, no, Cheryl replied. Then move out the way. Let him in, Joe teased, making her laugh. Catherine Marie accepted the cake with a smile. I really didn't need cake. But thank you, she said, placing it in the fridge. Then don't eat it, Joe quipped. Oh, but that'd be so rude. Our guest brings us a cake, and I don't eat it, she replied, patting her belly lightly. Joe hugged her from behind, a playful grin on his face. Joe, we have a guest. She laughed as Joe's hands wrapped around her waist. Won't take but a minute, Joe teased. Joe, leave me alone, she squealed, giggling as she wiggled free. They do that all the time, Tony said, rolling her eyes. What married people are supposed to do. Mike smiled, Tony's blush adding a warmth to the room. The 20-year-old turned and left the kitchen. Where are you going? Supper's just about ready, Joe called after her. To my room, Tony answered. How about you set the table? Joe said. Hey, I can do that, Mike offered. You're a guest, Joe objected. First time, I was a guest. Second time, I'm family, Mike said with a grin. Now, where are the plates? Tony showed him the cabinet, and together they set the table. She grabbed the knives and forks while Mike folded 6 paper towels into squares. Afterward, she placed the silverware on the napkins. You get the glasses and ice, Mike suggested. Dinner was hearty, with Catherine Marie's Jamelia, a tasty mix of chicken, pork sausage, rice, tomatoes, onions, and bell peppers, all simmered with a kick of cayenne pepper. Mike fought the urge to go for seconds, savoring every bite. You brought dessert, Joey cheered when the shortcake was mentioned. Yes, but I don't need it, Catherine Marie said once more. Good. More for me, Joey declared with a grin. Son, you've got a lot to learn about women, Mike chuckled. Sunday was a quiet, reflective day for Mike. He wasn't particularly religious and didn't attend church. Instead, he took a long walk to Oxbow Lake, where a few others who weren't keen on staying indoors had gathered. One young woman caught his eye, a stunning blonde, her skin sun-kissed and nearly brown from her tan. The young woman peered around, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses, as she looked to see if anyone was paying attention to her. She seemed to be seeking an audience, hoping for admirers, but no one noticed her. They were preoccupied with their frisbee game, their beach ball, or simply soaking up the sun. That's how I feel too, Mike said, watching as the attractive blonde visibly slumped. On Monday morning, Mike and Carlos finished the trim work. With nothing left to do, while the painters applied primer and stark white semi-gloss, and the electricians completed their rough work, Carlos shrugged and grabbed a broom and dustpan. Hey, Morrison, Joe called out. Yeah, Mike responded. My Tony wants to know if you're coming over for dinner tonight. Joe snapped, his face stern. I guess, Mike said, puzzled by Joe's tone. Joe's expression was serious. Man, listen. She's only 20. She's half your age. Hey, no, Joe. I haven't done anything, Mike protested. Joe stared at him for a moment before turning on his heel and starting to yell orders at the sheetrock men. Come on, need to roll these walls, he barked. Mike shrugged, leaned the broom and dustpan against the door jamb, and left the job site. The project was finished from his end. He could either stick around for the cleanup and touch-ups, or leave that work to Carlos and Carlos' cousin Philly. Barbara Trenton reviewed the receipts, quickly tapping on her keyboard, and nodded. She then turned her attention to Rhonda. So, she began. Is there any way you could chip in a little more? Rhonda wheedled. Barbara fought down her irritation. Divorce is pretty straightforward, she snapped. $400 a month per minor child, and half of medical and education expenses. Yeah, but I mean C died. Had to get a new one, Rhonda complained. Mrs. Peary, Barbara said. It's Morrison, Rhonda snapped. I'm interested, Barbara quipped. Mrs. Morrison, your failure to plan is not my client's concern. And where's your client? Rhonda demanded. Missed Michelle's birthday. We sent her a birthday card, Barbara stated, and a $10 gift card for Benny's Burger Bar with it. Barbara's personal assistant brought in the printed check, and Barbara signed it before sliding it across the desk to Rhonda. She placed the receipts into the plastic grocery bag Rhonda had used to carry them. Thank you, Mrs. Peary, she said. I apologize, Mrs. Morrison. She returned her attention to her computer monitor. So, Michelle's braces, Rhonda pressed. Michael A. Morrison Sr. has paid his half for those, Barbara said. He has paid his half for Michael A. Morrison Jr.'s soccer camp. He has also paid his half for the dental visits. Could you at least tell me how to get in touch with him? Rhonda pleaded. No, Barbara said coldly, turning her attention back to her monitor. I hope one day you have kids of your own and have to deal with someone like you. I have 3 of my own. Raised them on my own after my husband left us, and did just fine, Barbara replied, typing away. Gee, I wonder why your husband left you. Rhonda sniped. Found a selfish little brat who didn't threaten his male ego by earning her own way in life, Barbara said, still typing. But don't worry. After she left him, he tried to come back all apologies and sweetness, but it'll never happen again. So know it well. I am a made woman, and unlike you, I work hard for what I want. I don't open my legs to get what I want. Now get out. Mike answered his cell phone. Catherine Marie's asking if you're coming to dinner. Joe's voice snapped. It's chicken cacciatore, or what she thinks is chicken cacciatore. It's nothing like my mama used to make, that's for sure. I don't think so, Mike said. If you don't come, I'm in deep trouble, Joe said. 6 o'clock, hear me. Mike arrived at the house. Careful not to block the driveway with the travel trailer. Tony answered the door, smiling up at him. When she saw the shining trailer behind Mike, her eyes widened. "Oh, you're going camping?" she asked with a smile. "No, I'm moving on," Mike admitted. Tony's face fell, her eyes filling with tears as she dashed into the dark interior of the house. "What's wrong with her?" Joe demanded. "Come on in," Catherine Marie greeted Mike with a smile. Joey had already set the table, and Cheryl was grabbing the glasses. "Tony, it's ready," Catherine Marie called out as she served the meal. "Tony," Catherine Marie demanded a moment later as she took her seat at the table. "Antoinette Catherine Marie Tonetti. Looks like you're in trouble," Joey said to Mike. "Well, don't tell her my full name," Mike joked. "I'll go get her," Cheryl offered. "Joe, say grace," Catherine Marie ordered. "I'll go get her." The four of them hesitated until Joe began eating. Then Cheryl, Joey, and Mike joined in. Moments later, two plump, beautiful blonde women entered the kitchen and took their seats. Both women had reddened eyes. "So, Mike, why are you leaving?" Catherine Marie demanded. I mean, the job's done, right?" Mike stammered as Joe looked up from his plate. "We just started rolling it today," Joe said. "But my job's done," Mike pointed out. "Framing's done." "Aha, but we're fixing to start on Great Oak National Bank Monday after next," Joe argued. "Mike, please stay," Tony whispered, staring intently at her plate. Her green eyes were swimming with tears as she mouthed please at him before looking down again. 5 years later, Rhonda Morrison drove up and down Roberts Drive, admiring the stunning homes in this section of the Texas town. She stopped the rental car in front of the red brick house. 1809, she muttered. She smirked at the sight of the shiny travel trailer beside the house. When Mike had bought it, she had insisted on a concrete pad for it, not wanting to see overgrown grass around something they'd never use. The trailer was perched on a concrete pad next to the large garage. Rhonda looked at the neatly manicured lawn, lively flowers, and the cute wooden wheelbarrow in the yard. She smirked at the flowers. Mike had always said they were just weeds. Steeling herself, Rhonda approached the front door and pressed the doorbell. A disembodied female voice answered, "Yes." Rhonda looked at the small speaker and saw she was on camera. A small lens was at the top of the metal grill. "Hi, I'm Rhonda Morrison. Does Mike Morrison live here?" she said, flustered. "And you are?" the female voice asked. It was neither unfriendly nor welcoming. Rhonda grew agitated. This wasn't how she had envisioned it. She had splurged on her travel outfit. The jersey material clung to her 36D breasts, lifted by a push-up bra. The same material highlighted her midsection, but at 39, that couldn't be helped. The jeans accentuated her hips and thighs, and though her backside was wider than she liked, the jeans squeezed everything into a more flattering shape. Now, standing on the doorstep with the Texas sun beating down, the jeans were soaked with sweat, and her blouse stuck to her more than clung to her. I'm Rhonda Morrison, his ex-wife," Rhonda said. "Oh," the voice exclaimed. "Does he know you're coming?" "No," Rhonda admitted. For several moments, she stood there. Just as she was about to ring the bell again, the door opened. Mike stood there, looking better than she had remembered. His blonde hair had streaks of silver, his face was bronzed by the sun, and his chest and arms were muscular under his tank top. He wore swim trunks, and his legs were thick with muscle. His waist looked slim. "Yes?" Mike demanded. "Hello, Mike," Rhonda said, smirking. "Yes?" Mike demanded. Mike, is there somewhere we can talk?" Rhonda stammered. "Right here's fine," Mike said. A beautiful young blonde woman stepped into view. Rhonda looked from Mike's stern face to the woman, who had long blonde hair, beautiful green eyes, and a gentle expression. Mike and the woman had most likely been swimming. The young blonde wore a small wrap from just under her armpits to just below her crotch. Her arms were slim, her legs sleek, and the wrap flared away from her chest. "Michael, Y'all go to the sunroom, the young woman said softly, with a rich Texas twang. Precious, I don't want her in my house, Mike said firmly. Michael, the woman said, peering into his brown eyes. 5 minutes. Fine, come on, Mike ordered. Rhonda watched as the woman scampered toward what Rhonda presumed was the sunroom, opened the atrium doors, and stepped outside. Through the large glass window, Rhonda saw a large swimming pool with a Hispanic-looking girl and 2 young boys. The blonde woman removed her wrap and stepped down into the pool. Rhonda's mouth dropped at the sight. 5 minutes, let's go, Mike ordered, snapping Rhonda's attention away from the attractive blonde. Really? Rhonda spat bitterly. We were together for 14 years. Can't you be a little nicer? Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like a glass of champagne? Some caviar. Golly, where are my manners? Mike snapped sarcastically. Come on, Rhonda. You came all the way out here. Let's get to it. I don't know if you heard, but Michelle's getting married next month, the 9th, Rhonda said. Yeah. How far along is she? Mike asked bluntly. Rhonda blushed at Mike's direct question. She glanced toward the swimming pool. In a month and a half, she admitted. Was Mike's response. She'd really like it if her dad could walk her down the aisle, Rhonda said. God, do I have to? Mike spat bitterly. Well, I mean, she'd really appreciate it, Rhonda stammered, puzzled by his reaction. Want to go to Benny's Burger Bar? Mike suggested. Hey, it's my birthday. I want to spend some time with my kids. And what do I hear? God, do I have to? So no, Rhonda, I won't be walking Michelle down the aisle. Tell her to get John Peary to do it. All right. What else do you have? John Peary is no longer a part of our lives, Rhonda snapped, her pretty face twisting with frustration. Mike responded, turning to see a little girl bravely jumping from the diving board into the pool. He smiled as the 2 women applauded the girl's achievement. The girl swam to the ladder and ran to the atrium doors, dripping water everywhere. Daddy, did you see me? The girl shrieked. Yeah, I saw you. You jumped from the board right into the deep end, just like a big girl, Mike said, picking up the wet child and hugging her. I'm proud of you. Hello, Rhonda said to the blonde woman who entered the room. I'm sorry she ran in here before I could stop her, the blonde said. My mommy's a teacher, Audrey said proudly. Oh, it's fine, Rhonda said. She didn't disturb anything. Mike smiled and gave his daughter a big squeeze. Come on, sweetheart. Show mommy that big jump again, okay? Daddy, you need to watch, Audrey demanded. Like I could ever take my eyes off you, Mike said with a smile, squeezing her again. So why can't Mickey walk his sister down the aisle? Mike asked as Audrey stepped back onto the diving board. He's just out of the treatment center, Rhonda stammered. I mean, I know he's out, but just how bad is your insurance? It didn't pay a penny for his treatment. Mike asked, smiling as Audrey jumped into the water again. What insurance? Rhonda spat bitterly. I know it paid $28,000 the first time, and that was just my half. Paid $31,000 the second time. And this one was what, $38,500. My half, Mike said. Rhonda looked pointedly around the sunroom at the rodent furniture, Spanish tiles, and large backyard with the swimming pool. Quit sending him to country clubs, Mike demanded. Frankie's boy got clean and sober at the charity ward, and has been clean for almost 9 years now. Rhonda glared angrily at Mike. He clearly had no idea of the guilt she'd been carrying for the past 4 years. Rhonda had been humiliated when she learned she hadn't received a payment she was sure she'd sent. She had stormed upstairs to complain, only to find John and her 13-year-old son in their bedroom. Mickey told the police that it had been going on since the second night they moved into John's house. After John's arrest and the divorce, Mickey started skipping school, staying out late, and coming home with alcohol on his breath. The first treatment center was after Rhonda came home to find Mickey unconscious, a needle still in his arm. Her job at Myra's boutique was commission-based, and she struggled to cover expenses. 3 years later, she was still paying off her half of the bill. "He's in jail," Rhonda admitted. "Wonder if I still have to pay you child support if he's in jail." Mike wondered aloud as he watched his wife, the maid, and the children toweling off. "He's still a minor," Rhonda snapped. "Aha, but you don't have him in your custody, do you?" Mike said, getting to his feet. "5 minutes is up, Rhonda." "Really? I flew all this way to beg you to be a part of your daughter's wedding, and you're just going to go on about it?" Rhonda shrilled. "Did I ask you to come here?" Mike asked. "No, Michelle did," Rhonda snarled. "Then maybe Michelle should have come," Mike said, opening the door to the sunroom. "Hey guys, are you all waterlogged?" "My fingers are all bumpy," Audrey announced. "Oh, that's terrible," Mike said. "Well, you seem to have done all right for yourself," Rhonda snarled bitterly at Mike. "No thanks to you." Mike smiled and ushered Rhonda out of the house. Neither said a word as he closed the heavy door behind her. As she walked from the door to her car, Rhonda felt sweat begin to gather around her waist and under her armpits. Inside the home, Mike entered the kitchen where a mild commotion was taking place. His wife and their maid were trying to figure out what the children wanted for dinner. "Boogers and toes," Mike joked. "Don't get them started," the blonde smiled. "Daddy, I want hot dogs," Russell said. "Yeah, hot dogs," Bertrand echoed. "Now wait a minute." Carmen, the housekeeper, laughed. "I thought you said you wanted hamburgers." "I changed my mind," the boy stated. "How about spaghetti with hot dogs cut up in it?" Mike suggested. "Yeah." The 3 children agreed. "Daddy, you're the best." His wife smiled as she began preparing the pasta. After dinner and baths, which the children argued should count as a pool session, Mike read bedtime stories. He then walked into his bedroom. "Hey, precious," Mike said as his wife emerged from the closet, dressed in a simple t-shirt. "What did your ex-wife want?" she asked, kissing him. "Want to know how you can look so good even after being with an old man all this time?" Mike replied with a smile. "Plenty of protein," she said, smiling as she crawled onto the bed. "Come on, really. What did she want?" she asked. "She wanted me to walk my daughter down the aisle. Michelle's getting married next month on the 9th, Mike said, following her into bed. "So, are we going up to Rockell Falls?" she asked, smiling happily. "It's snowing up there yet in August," Mike teased. "No, precious. Despite what you Southerners might think, Colorado is nowhere near the North Pole," Mike smiled. "And no, we're not going. You think you're going up there by yourself. That's not happening," she snapped. "You're not going to walk her down the aisle." Mike's wife laid her blonde head on his chest, her fingers gently rubbing his muscled chest. He wrapped his right arm around her. "Baby, I know what happened. I know it hurt," she whispered. She lifted her head, her green eyes searching his. Mike moved to kiss her, but she pulled back. Mike remembered the first time he had seen her. She had been beautiful then, and even 6 or 7 years later, she was still stunning. He and Tony had gone on a few dates. Tony was beautiful, and her body was pleasingly plump. She was intelligent, thoughtful, exuberant, and fun. He cared for her very much, but there was no real spark or chemistry. The sex was terrific, but there was no real connection, other than 2 lonely people using each other. Thankfully, Tony had brought up the painful truth. "Michael, I love you," Tony said as they walked around Kennedy Park by Oxbow Lake. "Aha," he responded, distracted by a woman with a Yorkie. The woman had a tight backside and was wearing boy shorts that accentuated her figure. The Yorkie was on a retractable leash. Mike was fascinated by the dog's antics. "Michael, I love you," Tony repeated. Mike felt a pang of guilt. He knew he wasn't in love with her. He cared for her but didn't see a future together. "I'm just not in love with you," Tony admitted. "Kind of how I'm feeling too," Mike confessed. "I care a lot about you, but do I see any long-term romance here?" "Probably not." "Oh," Tony said. but I know we'll always be friends." "Yeah," Mike said. "I owe you one thing. You kept me from running off just because things got a little hard." Tony smiled up at him, and he put his arm around her and gave her a squeeze. Just then, the Yorkie started yapping and charging at a jogger. The jogger, unaware of the retractable leash, tripped and fell hard. The dog squealed and struggled underneath the jogger. The woman started screaming at the jogger. Mike rushed over, gently assisting the jogger and unhooking the dog's leash. "Hold your dog and drop the leash," Mike ordered. He managed to free the dog while the jogger remained on the ground, swelling on her forehead and a broken ankle evident. Mike called 911. "Yes, got a jogger here with a broken ankle and possible concussion. The dog caused it," Mike said. "The woman says the dog didn't trip her. She just fell," the operator responded. "I'm sorry, sir, but the nearest vehicle is 40 minutes away," the operator said. "Never mind. I'll get her there myself," Mike snapped. He picked the young woman up and carried her to his truck, with Tony following behind, casting a wary glance at the woman and her dog. The woman made a hasty retreat, and Mike reassured Tony, "Don't worry, got her picture. She'll be back." As Tony strapped the woman into the truck, he grabbed a cup of ice from a vendor and Mike handed him his handkerchief. Tony sat in the jump seat behind the young woman, holding the improvised ice pack to her head, while Mike drove quickly, hazard lights flashing, toward the ER. The woman moaned softly a few times, but remained unconscious when Mike screeched to a halt outside the emergency room. A nurse and an orderly quickly came out, pushing a gurney. Mike explained the situation as they loaded the young woman onto the gurney. Afterward, he drove Tony home. They hugged and Tony wiped a tear from her eye before going into her parents' house. Mike debated whether to return to the hospital or head home. The late hour and the demands of the next day's work, both at Scanduro and on a foreclosure project, made the decision for him. He had a full day ahead, and he was also planning to find more permanent lodgings than his travel trailer. While waiting for Scanduro Construction to finish the Adams office suites and start work on the Great Oak First National Bank, Mike had bought a foreclosure in a modest neighborhood. The previous owners had left the property in disrepair, but Mike managed to purchase it and another nearby home. Mike also acquired properties on Roberts Drive, a gated community where owners had overextended their credit. He sold 3 of the 4 properties at a reasonable return and decided to move into the 4th home on Roberts Drive. He worked for Scanduro Construction during the day and handled renovation and reconstruction in the evenings and on weekends. His latest project was in the same gated community on Simpson Way. The previous owner had overextended on a failed investment and had ended his life in the house. Nora Sanford, the man's wife, had emptied the safe deposit boxes and vanished, leaving the house as the final piece of the estate. Mike purchased it at a fraction of its estimated value. He needed only to update the carpet and paint, as the previous decor featured very bold colors. After a day of work, Mike decided to visit the hospital instead of heading to the Simpson Way property. He parked and entered the hospital, only to realize he didn't know the young woman's name. A nurse checked his driver's license and, after a brief search, directed him to the 4th floor. When Mike entered the room, the woman's first words were, "They cut up my shoe. Get it off." Mike smiled at her clear green eyes and said, "They weren't sure, but they thought there might be a doctor who could help with that knot." The woman looked at him with curiosity. "I was going to Connolly," she said. "Oh, what were you studying?" Mike asked. "Education," she replied. "I want to be a teacher." Mike nodded, recognizing a potential connection. "Maybe that's where I know you from. Did you pick Tony up there a few times?" She studied his face for a moment before shaking her head. "I don't think so. By the way, you got a name?" she asked. "Huh. Oh, Mike. Mike Morrison," he said. "Precious," she replied. "Yeah, I know I don't look Mexican." "Precious, is there anyone you need to call?" he asked. Her beautiful face clouded over. "Ah, no. She stammered, looking away. Mother, father. He pressed further. Mom died of ovarian cancer. My dad said, you're not my kid either. Either get out or stay. Precious said. Oh, Mike said, looking at his watch. I only have another 2 hours of sunlight left to work. I'll be back. She smiled sadly and lowered her bed. Even in the shapeless hospital gown, when she lay back, Mike could see her figure, and he remembered where he had seen her before. Oxbow Lake, he said. Huh, Precious asked, pausing the bed's momentum. That's where I've seen you before. On the beach at Oxbow Lake, Mike explained. Precious immediately moved to ensure her gown's hem covered her. She blushed hotly. No, you were there sunbathing, Mike said. Beautiful girl in a beautiful green bikini, but looking about as sad as I felt. What have you got to be sad about? Precious asked. Mike took the seat again. Precious raised the bed and looked at him. I was happily married, had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. We wanted to name them Russell after my old man. God, my old man was the greatest, Mike said. Or Bertrand, after my mom's dad. Give him a piece of wood, and in minutes he'd carve a car, a frog, or a boat. So, what did you name him? Precious asked softly, taking his hand into hers. Rhonda, Mike said. That was my wife. Rhonda decided on Mike Jr. We called him Mickey. That's a good name, Precious smiled. I like that name. Yeah, it's a pretty good name. I mean, I was named after my dad's brother who died in. Mike agreed. And your little girl? Precious asked. Audrey, Mike said. Oh, I love that name. Precious enthused. Yeah, it was my mom's name. Audrey Nicole Mellister Morrison, Mike said. But Rhonda decided on something else, Michelle. Michelle Christina Morrison. Cute, right? Michael and Michelle. You see them a lot. Been a few months now, Mike admitted. They're up in Raquel Falls. They've got a swimming pool and a boogie board. What do they need with their dad, huh? Mike stayed until an orderly brought Precious her dinner. To his surprise, he leaned over and gently kissed her on the lips. The next morning, Mike was working on the main load-bearing wall in the bank's main lobby. His pocket vibrated, and Back in Black by AC/DC chimed. Michael, a soft voice asked. Aha, Mike agreed, wiping the sweat from his face. It was just after 10 o'clock, and already the Texas sun was broiling. Mike walked over to the cooler and grabbed a paper cup. Michael, they're discharging me today, Precious said. Be there. At least they'll feed you lunch, Mike said, sweeping his eyes around the site to locate Joe. No, they've already got me out in the hall, Precious admitted. Oh, for crying out loud, really? Mike spat. I'll be there as soon as I can. Joe shrugged his shoulders when Mike informed him of the emergency at the hospital. An orderly wheeled Precious to the curb. Mike lifted her and put her into his truck, then helped her buckle up. Okay, where am I taking you? He asked. Home, she said. She gave him directions to the Spanish Arms Apartments, then remembered her car was still at Kennedy Park. Mike shrugged off her apologies and drove to Kennedy Park. She pointed out the 2005 Volkswagen Beetle and slapped his arm when he mocked the tiny car. Shut up, it's cute, she defended, laughing. He made a buzzing sound as he parked next to the vehicle, then came around to help her out of his truck. Things not a stick, huh? Mike asked. Well, yeah, Precious said. Mike looked at the plaster boot on her leg. She realized driving her car would be extremely difficult. Okay, your apartment's not that far. I'll drop you off, then drive it over there, Mike decided. Oh, Michael, that's too much, Precious argued. Precious, you can't drive like that, Mike said. And we can't leave it here. Pulling up to the Spanish Arms again, Mike saw a new problem. Precious lived on the 3rd floor. Precious, they didn't give you any crutches? Mike asked. Huh? No, they didn't give you any crutches, she realized. Honey, how are you going to get up and down those stairs? Mike asked. I don't know, Precious said, and burst into tears. Okay, come on, get your key out, Mike ordered. He carried her up to her apartment, then left her in the dank, sweltering apartment. He drove to Burns & Burns supermarket and grabbed a few boxes. What are those for? Precious asked when she managed to hobble to the door and open it for Mike. Pack clothes, toiletries, whatever you need for the next couple of weeks, Mike ordered. You're staying with me at least until you can get around on your own. Precious was about to argue, but then thought about it for a moment. Just moving from couch to door had been a struggle. How was she going to manage moving from couch or bed to the door and down to the ground floor of her apartment building? I assume your apartment is on the ground floor, Mike asked as he carried the boxes into her bedroom. Yours will be, Mike assured her as he looked around the neat, orderly bedroom. Listen, give me the keys to your Beetle, and I'll be back, okay? Oh, Precious, you don't want to help me pack, she asked. I've seen enough of women's drawers to last me a lifetime, Mike said with a smile. He surprised Precious by leaning forward and giving her a light kiss on the lips before he left the apartment. Mike drove down to a gas station and rented a hitch and harness. He then drove to the park and attached the hitch to the front end of her car. Unbelievable, Mike smiled as he drove away, the truck pulling the small car effortlessly. Okay, I think I'm ready, Precious said. Okay, Mike said, and he lifted her into his arms. He carried her down to the truck, then trotted back up the stairs to get the boxes. Anything else? He asked before putting her into his truck. Nope, she smiled. She then surprised him with a kiss on his lips. Thank you, Michael. Mike smiled and jogged back upstairs to make sure he locked her apartment securely. So, my apartment's on the ground floor. How many apartments are there? Precious asked. Well, your bedroom is on the 3rd floor. It's a 3-story house, Mike said as he turned onto Roberts Drive. Oh, I come through here at Christmas time, Precious said, looking around the affluent neighborhood. Christmas? Mike asked. Yeah, a lot of these houses really go all out with lights and decorations, Precious explained. Like Clark Griswold? Mike asked. Who? Precious explained. Like Clark Griswold? Mike asked. Who? Precious asked. Griswold. Christmas Vacation, Mike said. She shook her head, then looked astonished when he pulled up to his house. She was still trying to peer up into the 3rd-story windows, craning her neck back when he helped her down from the truck. 5 windows up there, Precious said. You need something in each window. Mike asked as he closed the truck door. When you do your Christmas lights, you need something in each window, Precious said, holding out her arms, ready for him to pick her up again. He jogged inside, unlocked, and opened the door of the house, then ran back and scooped her up. Ah, carrying me across the threshold, she quipped. When I carry you across the threshold, I hope you'll at least be wearing a nice dress and definitely better shoes, Mike smiled. Huh. What's wrong with fiberglass? Precious asked, waggling her heavy cast. Ah, it puts the UG in ugly, Mike declared and set her gently onto the couch. Ooh, I love this couch, Precious said. Is this where I'm staying? No, I'll carry you to the bedroom after I get your stuff in, Mike said. He made quick work of lugging her boxes into the house, then carried her to her bedroom. Yep, you're a man, Precious quipped, looking around at the austere furniture. Mike chuckled as he laid her onto the bed. She didn't let go of him when he moved to straighten up. Thank you, Michael, she said softly and kissed him on the lips. Welcome, Mike said. Oh, you, don't need the bathroom. It's right across the hall. Mind reader, or are my eyes starting to turn yellow? Precious said. Mike scooped her up again and carried her to the small, simple bathroom. He smiled as he sat her on a commode, then quickly exited the room and firmly shut the door. Holler when you're done, he called through the door. Mike located several more pillows throughout his house and brought an old tube television into the room. He then heated a can of soup and used a slightly rusted cookie sheet as a tray for her. He also drove to Rental and rented some aluminum crutches for Precious. This began 5 weeks of cohabitation. The first few mornings, Precious lightly complained about being awakened before sunrise for breakfast. On the third morning, Mike found Precious waiting wide awake, arms outstretched, ready for him to carry her to the kitchen. "You got those crutches?" Mike asked on the fourth morning as he scooped her up into his arms. "But I like when you carry me," she whispered into his ear. Mike could smell her toothpaste and realized Precious had awakened, hobbled across the hall to brush her teeth, then returned to the bedroom to wait for him. He smiled at her, and she returned his smile. "Honestly," he said, "I like carrying you too." Joe did complain when Mike had to take off for Precious' doctor visits and physical therapy. Teresa White, a lawyer recommended by one of Mike's coworkers, helped Precious. Sue Mary Buchhammer, the owner of Dawson, the Yorkie that had tripped Precious, also took up some of Mike's time. "Hey Mike, we all have other stuff to do. Can't we schedule this after work?" Joe complained the next time Mike asked for an early afternoon off. Mike tried to explain. "Make up your mind. What's more important, having a job or whatever this is?" Joe spat. Mike didn't answer and didn't remind Joe about the early afternoon he'd requested off. The next morning, Joe screamed at Mike in front of the other employees. Mike smiled, nodded, and walked off the job site. "Hey, you're home early," Precious said as she looked up from her textbook. "Aha," Mike grumbled. "Oh, I don't have an appointment, do I?" Precious asked, alarmed. No, got run off the job," Mike said. "Oh, Michael, what happened?" Precious asked, patting the cushion next to her. Mike sat next to her on the couch and told her about the mild animosity that had developed when he was dating Joe's daughter, the girl he had been with the night Precious was injured. The animosity hadn't gone away even though Mike was no longer dating Tony, and it had been compounded by Mike's frequent needs for time off. "Oh, Michael, why didn't you say something?" "I would have gotten one of my friends to take me," Precious said. "But I wanted to take you," Mike admitted. "Why?" Precious asked, her green eyes peering into his brown eyes. "I am. Ah, well, you know," Mike stammered. "Michael, I'm not going to say it first. I need to hear you say it," Precious admitted, taking his large hand into her small one. "Say it," she urged, her face inches from his. "Because I'm in love with you," he admitted. "And I'm in love with you, Michael Arthur Morrison," Precious whispered, then kissed him on the lips. Now unemployed, Mike bought more homes that had fallen victim to the recent collapse of the housing market, made the necessary repairs and renovations, and continued to earn money. The benefit of being his own boss was that he had the time and availability to take Precious to doctor's appointments, physical therapy, and for little outings and excursions. On one such outing to the Hog's Head, a barbecue restaurant Precious loved, Mike discovered his true status. "Hey, Press," a muscular young man said with a slight sneer on his face. "Oh, hi, Barry," Precious said, her voice fairly flat. "So, this is your dad?" Barry asked, trying to sit next to Precious on the bench. Precious used her hand to prevent Barry from taking the seat. "No, this is my fiancé, Michael Morrison. Michael, this is Barry. I used to date him," Precious said. "Whoa," Barry laughed mockingly. "Your fiancé. See, Barry. Oh, hey, Allison." "What's up, girl?" Barry said, finding a different seat. "See, I found out there's a huge difference between men and little boys." Precious smiled sweetly. "Hey, Precious, the ribs are here," Allison said. Barry glared at Mike, jostled the table with his hip, and walked back to another table. "Your fiancé?" Mike asked as the waitress brought them their brisket platters. "Oh, you didn't know." Precious smiled, squirting some Texas heat barbecue sauce onto her brisket, followed by a generous squeeze of Texas sweet sauce. She stirred the two sauces together with her index finger, then held out her dripping finger. "Want to get married the day after Christmas, you hear?" she asked. Mike took the sauce from her finger. "Give me about a month to find the perfect ring," he agreed. Precious smiled triumphantly. She smiled even wider when Mike squirted the 2 sauces onto his own plate of brisket. "Gives me time to get this thing off too. Can you 2-step?" Precious asked. "And gives me time to get some dancing lessons," Mike said. Brandon Wright, the pastor of the Fellowship non-denominational church in Sweet Oak, Texas, performed the wedding ceremony. The handsome man was gregarious, loud, and jubilant, and his love of God and preaching was evident. Mike had learned how to do a Texas 2-step and Texas swing. The fellowship hall, attached to the church, reverberated with cheers as the DJ kept the dancers on the floor. The Hog's Head barbecue provided the meal, and the guests became miserable, but smiled widely as they enjoyed the feast. Toni Tonetti congratulated Michael and Precious, then locked herself in a stall of the ladies' room and sobbed. Emmanuel Wright, Brandon's 23-year-old son, stood outside the bathroom. When Toni finally emerged, the handsome young man offered her a handkerchief. "Sometimes seeing someone else happy can be a little hard," he quietly offered. Toni said nothing, just dabbed at some fresh tears with the soft cloth. "When my cousin Amelia got married, I wanted to punch the guy she was marrying," the young man admitted. "Oh yeah?" Toni smiled slightly. "Yeah, but Dad intervened." Emmanuel smiled. "Guys in tackle for the Kennelly Cougars." "Ouch," Toni agreed. "Well, I haven't seen you out there on the dance floor yet," Emmanuel said. "Legs are broken, huh?" Toni giggled. "Now then, what are you waiting for? Let's go," Emmanuel said, grabbing her hand. 9 months and 2 days after Reverend Brandon Wright pronounced them husband and wife, Mike Morrison found himself at L's Hospital again for the birth of Bertrand Michael and Russell Michael Morrison. Precious sobbed, screamed, wailed, gasped, and cried through the 5-hour delivery. In between gasps, grunts, and other sounds, she held onto Michael's hand and declared her undying love for him, her knight in shining armor. 17 months later, Toni Wright and her husband Emmanuel Wright were 2 doors down, having their first child at the same time Precious was having their daughter, Audrey. Back in the present, the Morrison family was traveling back to Mike's town to make amends with his children. "I cannot believe," Mike grumbled as they stepped off the airplane in Ben Hust, Colorado. "New Texas would finally get tired of your ugly face, huh?" Lyle Curtis, Mike's former boss, announced as he hugged the man. Hey, man, how you doing?" Mike laughed happily, hugging Lyle. "What are you doing here? How you been?" "Less hair, more gut," Lyle replied. "About the same you." Lyle laughed. I'm good. Lyle Curtis, want you to meet my family. Honey, I'm sure whatever incriminating evidence he's got on you, the statute of limitations has run out, huh?" Lyle joked when he met Precious. "Huh?" Precious asked. "He thinks I'm blackmailing you," Mike explained. "No kidding," Lyle said as he shook the hands of the twins. "I'm Audrey." "I'm 4, Audrey said, holding out her hand for Lyle. "And ain't scared of nothing neither," Mike stated. "Now, I know you booked a suite at the Hilton. Lizzie, my daughter, is the manager there," Lyle said as the family grabbed their 3 suitcases from the carousel. "But you're staying at my house," Lyle added. "Mr. Curtis, you sure?" Precious asked. "Mr. Curtis, Lyle, he said, not offended. "By the way, what's your real name?" "I kind of feel funny calling another man's wife Precious." "The name's Precious," she said. "Oh well, suits you." After the family was situated, Mike and Precious in the guest room, Audrey in the old room of Lytle's daughter, and the twins on the pull-out sofa bed in the man cave, Mike took a deep breath. "I'll go check on the boys," Precious said. "What?" "They're just," Mike started, pulling his cell phone out of his shirt pocket. "Give you some privacy," Precious said softly, then kissed him. "Love you." "Love you too," Mike said, smiling. "That's your daughter, Michael. Above all, she's your daughter. She's a part of you," Precious counseled, then stepped out of the bedroom. "Hello," a girl's voice answered, sounding guarded. Mike's stomach, already twisted, suddenly spasmed. He almost ended the call. Hey, hi, this is your dad, Mike said. Who? Michelle asked. Oh, Dad, she said. Yeah, listen, I'm in town, planning on taking my wife and kids to Benny's Burger Bar. They've heard all about it. There's 1,000 ways to fix your burger, so we're going there at 6. Would love to see you there. Yeah, sure, Michelle said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Great, Mike said. See you then, and ended the call. Precious looked up from the video game Bertrand and Russell were playing when Mike entered the room. She tilted her head at the scowl he wore. Benny's Burger Bar, 6 o'clock, Mike said. And it sounded like a snotty little, just like she was 13. Mike spat. You know, whenever I expect to get the red bum, I'm rarely disappointed, Precious said. My second graders, some are just the sweetest kids, and some of them, I swear, but when I just get rid of all expectations, it usually goes a lot better. Don't know why I let you talk me into this, Mike said, and smiled as Bertrand managed to find the pot of gold. Because I promised you a special night, Precious whispered into his ear. There is that, Mike agreed. But not here. Precious giggled as Mike reached around her waist. At 6 o'clock on the dot, Mike herded Audrey and Russell into the restaurant. Precious and Bertrand were just behind. Bertrand had seen a Porsche 9911 and wanted to get a closer look at the gleaming black automobile. Looking around, Mike felt a wave of disappointment, then a wave of anger. There was no sign of Michelle. She here, Precious whispered, taking Mike's hand. Nope, Mike said bluntly. Maybe she's stuck in traffic, Precious suggested. Sweetheart, did you see any traffic out there? Mike asked, his voice harsh. Recul Falls has to be traffic-free. Free, and if they want traffic jams. So how do we do this? Precious asked, helping Mike guide the 3 children to the counter. All right, first you order your burger. You want a 1/4 pound, a 1/2 pound, or a 1 pound? Mike said. A 1 pound? Audrey asked. Daddy's full of bull, Mike said. It's a 1/2 pound. Precious giggled. Then you want bacon, cheese, bacon and cheese. No bacon, no cheese, Mike continued. How about 1/2 bacon, 1/2 cheese? Russell asked. Aha, now you're getting the idea, Mike agreed. Then, when that slab of 100% beef goodness comes out, you walk over to the bar, and that's where the magic begins. There's over 40 different things you can put on that burger. Boogers? Bertrand asked. No, Precious said, her lips tight with disapproval. Those you have to bring your own. There's blue cheese, salsa, jalapenos, onion straws, Mike said. Sounds like you've been here before. The girl behind the counter smiled. Been a while. Used to be my favorite place, Mike admitted. Michelle showed up nearly 20 minutes late. She nodded in acknowledgement that she'd seen Mike, then turned her attention to ordering and fixing her burger. Hi, she snapped, slapping her tray down. You're what, about 5 months along? Mike smiled, looking at the punch. Aha, Michelle said, stuffing a mouthful of burger into her mouth. I'm 2 months along, Precious said, trying to establish a connection with the surly girl. That's nice, Michelle said. So, Dad, come on. You wanted this meeting. Let's go. Mother says you're getting married this Saturday. Mike fought hard against the urge to react to his impertinent daughter. Yeah, heard. You said who cares, Michelle agreed. Anyway, came to see you get married. Wanted you to meet your brothers and your sister. Ah, fine, Michelle said, taking a big gulp of soda. I'm Precious, Precious offered. I'm sure you are, Michelle smirked. That is her name, Mike said through clenched teeth. Precious Morrison. This little cutie here is Audrey. I'm 4, Audrey announced, holding out her hand for a big man. And the big guy there is Bertrand, and the big guy next to him is Russell. Guys, this is your big sister, Michelle. Hi, Bertrand said. I'm 4, Audrey said again. Hi, Russell said. So just thought you'd come back, and I'd be all like, oh hi, so great to see you again. Michelle snarled. Don't worry about being all over me, huh? No, thought you'd be all like, hey, sorry I was a selfish, self-centered, stuck-up little. Watch your language, Precious said softly. I acted like spending a few minutes with my dad, who worked hard for me, was a real imposition. But I've done a little growing up since then. But I guess we're both sorely disappointed, huh? Mike spat. Daddy, Audrey whispered to her mother. I know, I heard him, Precious said. Precious pinched Audrey's nose. I heard you say it too just a minute ago. I was just telling on Daddy, Audrey denied. Well, don't bother, Michelle spat, shoving her tray and causing her drink to spill. Don't bother coming to my wedding. I don't want you there. No problem, Mike shrugged, grabbing the tray before the soda spilled onto any of his children. Drop your present off at your mother's house, Precious offered as Michelle stomped out of the restaurant. Whatever, Michelle sneered and shoved the door open. Audrey started to speak, but Precious warned, and you say it, and you'll get a spanking. So, what did y'all think of Benny's Burger Bar? Precious asked as the five of them left the restaurant. Next time, I'm going to put a whole lot more pickles on mine, Bertrand enthused. And barbecue sauce, Russell agreed. Mike smiled at their enthusiasm. He and Precious smiled over the roof of Lyle's daughter's minivan as they slid the doors open. After dropping Precious and the children off at Scooters for ice cream, Mike drove to the address Barbara Trenton, his attorney, had provided. He checked the address again when he pulled up to the dilapidated apartment complex. Yo, can't be parking there. That's my boy's spot. Know what I'm saying? A boy, probably 15 or 16 years old, said. Sign says visitors. Telling me your boy's name is Visitors. Mike snapped, taking the wrapped package off the passenger seat. Now, if he was to let me hold 5, the boy suggested. Ain't gonna happen. And pull your pants up, kid, Mike said. Mike kept an eye on Lyle's minivan as he knocked on Rhonda's door. He winced. It sounded like his fist was about to go through the door. What? Who's there? Rhonda's voice sounded harsh. What do you want? It's Mike. Mike called out, still watching the van. Here to drop off Michelle's wedding present. Yeah, her meeting went great, Rhonda smirked, yanking open the door. Ah, where's Barbie? Who? Mike asked, thrusting the package at Rhonda. Your little Texas wife, Rhonda sneered. Ah, go screw yourself, miserable, Mike spat. Thought you'd trade up, but just can't stand it that I did too, huh? Rhonda said. Great trade. Think I'll keep mine though, Mike said with a smile, and turned away. Mike paid no attention to the screaming tirade behind him. He marched down the stairs and opened the door of the van. Hey, kept an eye on the wheels for you. About $1, the boy wheedled. Kid, pull your pants up. Any idea how ignorant you look? Mike snarled and slammed the door of the van shut. The kid gave Mike the finger. Mike revved the engine and put the van in forward. He laughed when the kid's eyes widened with fright as he attempted to run backward and ended up falling flat on his back. Mike put the van into reverse and sent Precious a text message that he was on his way to Scooters. Daddy got you a double-dipped double chocolate, Precious said when Mike entered Scooters. Got you a big old sloppy kiss, Mike said, and kissed Precious with enthusiasm. Michael, quit, Precious giggled as their children laughed. Mike's meeting with Mickey fared slightly better than his meeting with Michelle, just as he had been when he was 10. The 17-year-old was sullen and uncommunicative. He wouldn't even look up from the table in the small cinder block room when Mike attempted conversation. Oh, and thanks for those cheap Benny's Burger Bar gift cards, Mickey finally sneered. You're welcome, Mike said easily. $10 doesn't buy much at Benny's, Mickey said. I know $10 doesn't buy much at Benny's, Mike said. Quarter-pound fries with a drink, at least $14. Mike smiled. So, why the hell did you only send a $10 gift card? Mickey asked, his voice rising in anger. So you have to stick your selfish little hand into your own pocket, Mike replied with a smile. Huh, Mickey asked, confused. Anyway, "Good luck with the trial next Thursday," Mike said, getting to his feet. "Why do you even come here?" Mickey demanded. "Honestly, I wanted to see if there was any of that kid left," Mike admitted. "Saw your sister. There's nothing left there. There's nothing of the little kid in her. First play was supposed to be a tree, but she kept looking over at me and smiling and waving at me." "What's a tree got to do with it?" Mickey screamed. "Was hoping there'd be some of that little buddy who went fishing with me. Remember when you caught that rainbow trout?" "Damn, that was a fish," Mike said. 6.5 pounds, Mickey said quietly. "Yep, and the first thing out of your mother's mouth was, 'I ain't cleaning that thing.' But boy, did she eat the heck out of those fillets," Mike said as the deputy unlocked the door. "Hey, how'd you get all those fillets out of that fish?" Mickey suddenly asked. "Ran down to near Myers and bought 3 more trout." Mike chuckled and stepped out into the hall. "Dad, Dad," Mickey cried out as the heavy door slammed shut. Precious was true to her word. Mike had made an attempt at reconnecting with his kids. He had even spoken with Barbara Trenton about assisting Mickey. The harsh woman pursed her lips and charged Mike $3,000, but she did represent Michael Arthur Morrison, Jr. in his trial. Through Barbara Trenton, Mike heard that Mickey had been sentenced to 2 years. Because the sentence was longer than 1 year, he would have to serve his time in a Colorado state penitentiary. But Barbara had managed to get Mickey assigned to 5 Tribes, a medium-security penitentiary. A few months after that news, Mike heard that he was a grandfather. Michelle Schron had given birth to Louise Charlotte Schron, a beautiful baby girl. Precious had given birth to Louise Charlotte Schron, a beautiful baby girl. Precious asked, "Michael, that's not right." And through Barbara, Mike heard that his granddaughter had not lived to see her first birthday. The tears Mike shed were heartfelt as he penned a letter of condolence to his daughter and her estranged husband, Alan Charles Schron. 7 months later, Precious gave birth to Olivia Nicole Morrison. Mike was overwhelmed with joy, but a strange sense of pain haunted him. He held his daughter, but he could never hold his grandson. 3 weeks later, the world was to collapse again. Precious was waiting in the driveway for Audrey to return from school. As the school bus came to a halt and Precious walked towards it, a man driving his pickup truck at high speed struck Precious and later rammed into a nearby house. Audrey saw the whole ordeal. 3 hours later, Precious was put on life support at the nearby hospital. Mike was not crying. He was just stunned. He was still trying to process the phone call that shattered his world. He drove to the hospital without any problem, but felt as if he were not driving. He felt as if he were sitting somewhere silent, with everything just moving around him. His body was responding to everything, but he could not feel Audrey's touch. He was able to see Audrey crying, yet he was unable to understand what to tell her. His silence was broken when the doctor finally came out and spoke. "Mr. Morrison, I tried my best. She is in a better place now." Mike felt the silence again, standing there for what felt like an eternity. He only came back to his senses when Audrey shook his hand and asked, "Can we see Mom?" Mike knew that it was time for the most difficult conversation he would ever have. "We may not see Mommy again. God asked her to come and stay with him in heaven, so she has gone into a deep sleep and might not wake up for a long, long time." He wasn't sure if Audrey understood, but she said, "Okay, let her sleep. We should go home. The baby needs to feed. It has been a long time for her without Mommy." Mike did not know if Audrey was playing a game or if she had just grown up to become the big lady of the house. He would have his answer 3 days later. Precious was in her casket, dressed in her wedding gown. Mike stood near her and placed his hand on her chest. This was the first time he placed his hand on her and did not feel her heartbeat. He could not hold his tears back when the thought came to his mind that he was never able to tell her what she meant to him and how much he loved her. He looked up to the cross and prayed for one moment to give her life so he could tell her how much he loved her and feel her heartbeat one last time. Everyone said their eulogies, and then his little princess, Audrey walked up to the stand with a piece of paper in her hand. Mike had already teared up. He knew he could not hold back his tears and did not want to cry in front of so many people. So he walked to the men's washroom and sat down in a booth. He was still able to hear Audrey's voice over the sound system. "My name is Audrey. I am 4 years old. My daddy must be in the potty. He does not like for people to see him cry. My mom is the most beautiful woman, and she is the strongest. My daddy told me that God wants my mom to stay at his house for some time. I am not sure when she will be back, but I know she will enjoy her stay. She is in heaven. If my mom is watching me from heaven, I want her to know that I love her and I will miss her. My mom's name is Precious, and she is very precious to me and my daddy. My little sister cannot speak yet, but I know she misses mommy as well. So God, please send her back quickly. Thank you, everyone. Please don't cry. My mommy is with God." With that small speech, Audrey brought tears to everyone's eyes. Mike quickly ran out, hugged Audrey, and let his tears flow like a small child. Audrey held him and whispered, "I am here for you, Daddy." They all went back home once the funeral was over. 2 years later, Mickey was out of the penitentiary, but wasted no time returning to his old ways. He hired a sex worker and got high on cocaine with her. His body was found in a massive wreckage on the highway. Both he and the sex worker died on the spot. Mike attended his funeral, but did not offer a eulogy, nor did he speak to anyone. Rhonda was crying, but Mike never approached her to console her. Once the crowd had left, Mike walked up to the grave and placed a white flower on it. Rhonda stood behind him and could only muster, "I am sorry, Mike. If only I had kept the family together. My desire for more in life took away my husband, my family, and now my son. I never knew that my actions would not just kill my marriage, but also my family." Mike said nothing. He just walked away. That was the last time he saw Rhonda alive. The next time he saw her was 10 years later at her funeral. At the funeral, Michelle handed him a letter. "Mom wanted you to have this." Mike took the letter and kept it in his pocket. He opened it at home and found that Rhonda had written just 3 words, "I am sorry." In her last days, the only thing she desired was his forgiveness. Mike folded the letter and kept it in his drawer. That night, he walked out to his porch and looked at the night sky, which was lit up by stars. He was lost in his thoughts when his daughter walked in behind him. "I saw the letter. Did I not teach you not to read personal letters?" he said. "Well, I forgot, but all she wanted was for you to forgive her. She's not among us anymore, so your hate is not going to impact her," she said. "You've started to talk like your mother," Mike said. "I can't help it. It must be in the genes, I guess. I did forgive her. I just don't know if she will ever know it. I forgave her when I married your mom. I just never told her. Now I cannot tell her." "You don't need to tell her. Just tell yourself," she replied. Mike slept well that night. He still marveled at how a 14-year-old could talk like an adult. 23 years later, he was sleeping again. But this time, he was sleeping forever. Audrey once again walked up to the stand to offer her eulogy. "My name is Audrey. The last time I was here, I was 4 years old. It was my mom's funeral. That day, my daddy told me that my mom was with God, and one day she would meet me. What he never told me was that the wait would be very long and would take an entire lifetime. Today, my daddy beat me to it. He is finally with the one he loved. When Mom died, everyone used to talk about how he would become an alcoholic and wreck his life. But he loved her more than anyone could imagine. He did not mourn her, he lived for her. Just to let everyone know how much he loved her, he never married again. He never dated anyone. For him, his kids were his only life. He was both my father and my mother. He was the one who taught me the difference between birds and bees. He was the one who went with me shopping for my prom dress. He was the one who taught me how to cook, how to fish, and above all, how to be a good human. He made sure all his kids were educated and had a good life. There aren't enough words to describe his kindness and his love. In my final words, I hope he finds his precious in heaven. Daddy, if you are watching, I have all my brothers and sisters here, and please know that we love you. Mike was laid to rest beside Precious that day. All his kids stood together near the graves of the two people who loved each other, finally concluding their story of lost love, together forever. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.